All right. So we've got a whole stack of articles here.
Yeah.
And it's all about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
DEI.
DEI, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like things are getting a little complicated.
Yeah.
We've got news from the Air Force, Walmart, Target, even a statement from the White House.
Wow.
So our mission today is to kind of figure out what is going on with DEI in 2025 and what it all means.
Yeah, it seems like there is a lot of pushback against DEI. It's pretty widespread. I mean, it's not just one industry or, one political group or anything like that.
Right.
It feels like a real cultural shift is underway.
Yeah, it really feels like everyone's trying to figure out where they stand.
Yeah.
And this new Trump administration
Right.
is definitely not making things any easier.
Definitely not.
Some companies are scaling back their DEI programs.
Yeah.
Others are doubling down.
Uh-huh.
So it's a real turning point, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like a defining moment.
Yeah.
Like companies are having to weigh you know, the potential benefits against, the risks of like legal challenges and bad press and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah. Tricky situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of tricky situations, let's start with the Air Force.
Okay.
One of these articles from AP News says they've actually removed training videos about the Tuskegee Airmen
Really?
and the Women Air Force Service Pilots, the WASP, from their DEI program.
That's a surprising move.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
These are, such iconic stories of, overcoming adversity and serving with distinction.
Right. The Air Force says it's just complying with the Trump administration's, crackdown on DEI initiatives.
Right.
But removing content about these groups, which are historically so significant. I mean, that raises some eyebrows,
It really does,
The Tuskegee Airmen, right.
I mean, they were the first Black military pilots in the U.S.
Right.
They faced segregation and prejudice.
Right.
But they built this incredible combat record during World War II.
Exactly. And the WASP, I mean, they were vital during the war effort.
Absolutely.
I mean, these women flew all sorts of missions, ferrying planes, freeing up male pilots for combat. I mean, their contribution was huge.
Huge.
And, these stories were used in DEI training to show just how powerful diversity and inclusion can be.
Right. And it's like they're highlighting, stories from their own history of inclusion.
Yeah.
So removing them just seems kind of, well, a little tone deaf.
Tone deaf, yeah.
It suggests there's like a disconnect between, their stated goal of inclusivity and the methods they're using.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, well, speaking of disconnect, let's talk about the Trump administration's position on DEI. Okay.
I mean, they haven't exactly been quiet about it.
No. President Trump has called DEI programs illegal and dangerous.
Yeah.
Straight out.
Yeah.
And he signed an executive order that aims to end them across the federal government.
Yeah. We even have a fact sheet from the White House here.
Wow.
That specifically criticizes the FAA.
Okay.
And they're saying that the FAA prioritized hiring people with disabilities over the best employees.
Wow.
And they argue that these DEI initiatives put merit and safety at risk.
Well, this is a key argument. From those who oppose DEI, they say these programs inherently discriminate against certain groups by prioritizing others.
Yeah.
So in this case, they're saying people without disabilities are being discriminated against.
Okay, so how are big companies reacting to all of this?
Yeah.
Like we've got some major names making some major changes.
Absolutely. Walmart is a prime example. They've significantly scaled back their DEI policies. They've abandoned their commitment to the racial equity center they established after George Floyd's murder. And they're no longer prioritizing women or minority-owned suppliers.
Target's following suit.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. They're ending their diversity goals. And this program supporting Black employees and businesses.
Yeah, and both companies are pointing to legal risks and the shifting political climate as the reasons for these rollbacks.
It's a tough spot for corporations to be in. They want to build inclusive and diverse workplaces, But they're facing all this pressure from shareholders and politicians who are critical of these DEI programs.
But not everyone is backing down.
No, not everyone. Costco, for one, is pushing back. Their shareholders actually rejected a proposal to evaluate the risks of their DEI practices.
Interesting.
So, and Apple and JP Morgan are also standing by their programs.
Okay, so we're seeing a split in corporate America.
Right.
Some are retreating.
Yeah.
Some are holding their ground. It makes you wonder where the general public stands on all this.
Well, public opinion is definitely divided.
Yeah.
Some people see DEI programs as like essential tools to combat inequality, while others think that they're actually discriminatory.
Right, right.
Recent polls show that there's been a slight dip in support for DEI, but it's still a really active debate with strong feelings on both sides.
Okay, so we've got the Air Force pulling back, a White House that's firmly anti-DEI, corporations caught in the crossfire, and a public that's divided. What does it all mean? What are we supposed to make of this whole situation?
Well, if you zoom out a bit, you know, I think what we're seeing is like a resurgence of this debate over how to achieve equality, you know? Is it through these proactive measures like DEI? Or is it by focusing on, you know, individual merit and just like avoiding any considerations of race or gender or anything like that? I mean, it's a debate that's been going on for decades. But it's definitely heating up again in 2025.
Yeah. It really feels like there are strong arguments on both sides, which I think makes it even harder to figure out what the right answer is. Where do we even go from here? What does the future hold for DEI?
Yeah, that really is the question, isn't it? Like what happens next with DEI? I think the next few years are going to be really crucial in determining the future of, you know, these kinds of programs. Will this backlash gain more traction? Will companies and institutions figure out ways to, you know, promote diversity and inclusion that are effective and legally sound?
It's interesting thinking about like the historical context here.
You
know, all the struggles for equality, the fight for representation. Does all that kind of get lost?
Yeah, that's a good point.
In this whole debate.
Like if even things like training videos about the Tuskegee Airmen are considered too DEI focused, what message does that send?
Exactly.
What are we supposed to do? Just like sweep these important historical moments under the rug.
It feels like we're at a crossroads. And like the path that we choose is really going to have a big impact on the future of, you know, diversity and inclusion in this country.
Okay, so I get like the legal and the political angles. But what about the companies themselves? Like what's really motivating their decisions here? Is it just about dodging lawsuits or is there something else going on?
I think it's probably a mix of factors. Legal concerns are definitely a big one, especially after, you know, the Supreme Court's recent decision on affirmative action. But there's also the issue of public perception. You know, some companies might be worried about alienating customers who are, you know, critical of DEI.
You know, some of these articles mention this conservative commentator, Robbie Starbuck. He's been kind of Targeting companies with DEI programs.
Oh, really?
On social media.
Wow.
He's been calling them out, you know, putting pressure on them to change their policies.
That's interesting. It really speaks to the power of social media and these online movements these days. You know, they can create real pressure on companies. Especially when it comes to their brand image and their reputation.
It really sounds like companies are walking a tightrope here. Trying to balance, you know, legal risks, public opinion, and their own internal values.
It's no wonder they're struggling to find the right approach.
And you also have to think about the internal dynamics within these companies, too.
Oh, right,
You know, employees have diverse viewpoints on DEI.
Of course,
Some see these programs as essential for a fair and inclusive workplace, while others might feel like they're discriminatory or create, you know, unnecessary divisions.
So how do companies navigate all of these, like, competing interests?
It's tough.
Is there even a way to promote diversity and inclusion without triggering this kind of backlash?
That's a great question, and it's something that I think a lot of organizations are wrestling with right now. There's no, like, easy answer, but some experts suggest Focusing on like the business case for diversity as maybe a more effective strategy.
What do you mean by the business case?
Well, there's a growing body of research showing that companies with diverse workforces tend to be more innovative and profitable. They have different perspectives, a wider range of ideas. They can connect better with diverse customer bases.
So instead of framing DEI as like a social justice issue, companies could emphasize like the economic benefits.
Exactly.
Okay.
It might be a way to kind of sidestep some of the political and ideological debates while still promoting a more diverse and inclusive workforce.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that just shift the focus from equity to profits?
Right.
Does that really address
That's a good point.
the underlying issues of inequality?
Yeah, focusing just on the business case might not be enough to really tackle the systemic issues of discrimination and bias. You know, I think it's important to acknowledge those issues and work towards solutions, even if it's through different channels.
So it sounds like there's no like one-size-fits-all solution here.
No.
Companies need to find strategies that align with their values and their specific context.
Absolutely. And it's also important to remember that this is a constantly evolving landscape.
Right.
The legal and political environment around DEI is changing all the time. So companies need to be, you know, adaptable and responsive.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that public support for DEI had dipped a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think is driving that shift?
That's a good question. It's hard to say for certain, but, you know, I think there are a few possible explanations. You know, the economic uncertainty of the past few years. You know, I think it might have made people more focused on their own, you know, kind of financial security.
So people are worried about like their jobs and their finances.
Right.
They might be less inclined to support programs that they see as benefiting others.
That's one possibility.
Okay.
There's also the issue of political polarization.
Right.
You know, the debate around DEI has become increasingly partisan.
Which I think makes it harder to have, you know, nuanced conversations about it.
Yeah. It feels like the conversation has become more about like us versus them than finding any kind of common ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful.
Not helpful for anyone.
Yeah.
Speaking of different perspectives, you know, these articles have mostly focused on corporations.
Yeah.
What about other sectors? Is this DEI backlash happening everywhere?
Yeah, it's definitely not limited to the corporate world.
Okay.
We're seeing pushback against DEI in education.
Okay.
Government.
Really?
Even the nonprofit sector.
Even nonprofits. I mean, they're supposed to be the good guys.
I know, but even nonprofits are subject to the same legal and political pressures as everyone else.
Okay.
And they also have to be mindful of their donor base, you know, which might have a range of views on DEI.
Okay, so this is a truly like
widespread phenomenon.
It is.
Affecting all corners of society.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty significant.
It is. It suggests a pretty fundamental shift in how we think about diversity and inclusion as a society.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What does the future hold for DEI?
Right. I mean, that's the question we're all trying to answer.
Yeah.
Will this backlash lead to the complete, you know, dismantling of these DEI programs?
Yeah.
Or will it force us to, like, rethink and refine our approach?
Right. Is there a way to create a more just and equitable society without resorting to programs that some people find discriminatory?
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we need to find ways to address systemic inequality without creating new forms of, you know, division and resentment.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
You know, we've talked about the Air Force, the White House, corporations trying to adapt, a public that's increasingly divided.
Right.
What are your final thoughts on all of this?
Yeah.
What should our listener take away from this deep dive?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that DEI is not a simple issue.
Yeah.
There are valid arguments on both sides.
Right.
And I think we need to be having more nuanced and respectful conversations about how to achieve true equity.
Yeah, it feels like this whole DEI debate is, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's happening at a crossroads with all this other massive change that's going on in the world. You know, got the political landscape shifting, economic uncertainty, the rise of AI.
Right.
And, you know, a whole generation coming of age with different ideas about identity and inclusion.
It is a fascinating time to be alive.
It is, yeah.
It's complex.
Yeah.
But I think all of this rapid social and technological change, it's bound to create, some tension and debate. Yeah.
As we figure out how to adapt, where we fit in.
Yeah.
I think this DEI backlash is just one part of this larger story about how we, as a society, are redefining our values. And priorities.
And it seems like that tension is definitely playing out.
Oh, yeah.
In the business world, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we see companies like Walmart and Target, scaling back their DEI efforts, while others like Costco and Apple are doubling down.
Right. It's a real litmus test for, corporate values.
Yeah, it is.
Some companies are, prioritizing short-term profits and just trying to avoid controversy, while others are playing the long game. They're recognizing that building a diverse and inclusive workforce is essential for the future.
Right.
And, it'll be interesting to see how these different approaches play out.
Oh, yeah. Over the next few years.
Yeah. One thing that's really striking to me is just how quickly things can change.
Right.
Just a few years ago, DEI was like a top priority.
It was.
For a lot of companies and institutions. And now it feels like the pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction.
Yeah. But I think that's just the nature of social change.
Right.
It's rarely a straight line. There are always ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Periods of progress followed by pushback.
Right.
I think the key is to just stay focused on those long-term goals and not get discouraged by temporary setbacks.
So what advice would you give to companies and individuals who are trying to, navigate this complex landscape?
Right.
How can we promote diversity and inclusion in a way that actually works?
Yeah, and doesn't just fizzle out.
Right.
Well, I think it starts with just being really clear about why diversity and inclusion are important to us. What is at the core of that commitment?
Yeah.
Is it about creating a more just and equitable society?
Yeah.
Is it about fostering innovation and creativity?
Right.
Is it about, connecting with a wider range of customers and stakeholders?
Right.
Once you really understand your why,
okay,
then you can start to build strategies that are, authentic and truly aligned with your values.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about the people who are skeptical about DEI? How do you even begin to have a productive conversation with people who see things so differently?
I think it really just comes down to approaching those conversations with empathy and respect.
Okay.
We need to really listen to each other's concerns. Yeah. And try to understand where those concerns are coming from.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to focus on, our shared goals. Okay. I mean, we might disagree on how to get there, but I think, most people would agree that we all want to live in a society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
I like that, focusing on what unites us rather than what divides us.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we're all in this together, even when we disagree.
Right. And I think it's also important to remember that diversity and inclusion aren't about taking something away from one group to give to another.
Right.
Creating a more inclusive world ultimately benefits everyone.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about.
Good.
This deep dive into the DEI backlash has been really eye-opening.
Good, I'm glad.
Things are definitely in flux.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure, we need to keep talking, keep learning, and keep working towards a more just and equitable world.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I think, let's do it with open minds.
Yeah.
And a willingness to learn from each other. I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
That if we can do that, we can find a way forward that benefits everyone.
That's a great thought to wrap things up on.
Good.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course.
We hope you found it insightful.
Yeah.
And as always, keep exploring these issues. There's always more to learn.
Absolutely.
More to discuss.
Right.
And more to do.
Yeah.
Until next time.